Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning into CCDC Shorts, where our goal is to deliver critical information on hot topics for your business. My name is Colleen Roth, and I'm the president of the River Heights Chamber of Commerce. CCDC is the Chamber Coalition of Dakota County, representing 5 chambers, 6 cities, and over 1,500 member businesses. Our focus today is to present a high-level overview of the 2023 legislative session. There is a lot to unpack, and I'm excited to have Laura Bordelon with us. Laura is the Senior Vice President of Advocacy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today, Laura.
I'm happy to be with you. I'm just a little anxious about keeping it short.
Well, Laura, this legislative session, as we talked about quite a bit, resulted in record spending and hosts of new mandates on businesses. Now, I realize this is a huge ask, but if you could take us through a few outcomes of this session, please.
I would be happy to. I'm going to share some slides with all of you. Okay, hopefully you're able to see my slides. And Colleen, I'm just going to take it from here.
Perfect.
So it was quite a remarkable session. This is the first time in 10 years that Minnesota has been governed under single party control, single party Democrat control. And you can see some of the quotes that we captured that reflect the sentiments and the mindset and approach of the legislative leaders. So Governor Walz talked about using political capital to improve the lives of Minnesotans. And Senate Majority Leader Carrie Dietzig talked about how Minnesotans are tired of gridlock and inaction, and that's what they were there to focus on and make a difference in. And Speaker Melissa Hortman of the House said we wanted to overpromise and underdeliver, and feels as if that's what they did. There were 30 different priorities for the DFL between the governor, the speaker, and the Senate Majority Leader. This is a partial list. This is about half of them, but it gives you a sense of how broad-ranging many of these items are, from clean energy and environment proposals to various workplace mandates like paid family and medical leave, gun control measures, tax rebates and checks and credits, healthcare mandates. There was a broad variety of policy items that they wanted to take head on, and they crossed almost every single one of them off the list this year. So the Minnesota Chamber's take is this is certainly one of the most consequential legislative sessions we've ever experienced. There are a lot of different terms that people have used to describe the session, from transformational to historic, landmark, even bonkers. It was a big one by any measure. And honestly, the long-term impacts of the session won't be known for a while. In fact, some of these bills, while they were passed, won't become effective or enacted for several years yet. The historic budget surplus was drained. State spending absolutely exploded under this particular legislature. $10 billion in new taxes was proposed, as well as a very significant expansion in state government. Thousands of new state employees will need to be hired to implement all of these different programs and laws. We found it to be an unusually partisan approach to policy making, given the very close divide, especially on the Senate side, with just a 1-vote majority. The approach seemed to be very anti-business and anti-employer. You'll see some of that in the tax and workplace mandate slides that I have ahead. And we really feel strongly that this was a missed opportunity in terms of changing Minnesota's tax system. 21 other states have reformed their taxes, all in a quest to have business attraction and retention and more talent recruitment. And we feel as if Minnesota really missed a golden opportunity with this large budget surplus to do that. So this is a where we started slide. The even years are budget setting sessions. So we started with this gigantic surplus, $17.5 billion. About $12 billion of that was left over from last session. They weren't able to reach agreement on a number of items. So there was $12 billion sitting there for their use. Already, as part of the ongoing budget, There was a 7.4% spending growth. There's a structural surplus of $5.4 billion, even with that spending growth factored in. And the state's reserve and cash flow accounts are at historic high levels of $3.2 billion. So plenty of money for the legislature to deploy. And where we ended up with is historic spending growth. There is a 37% state general fund budget increase. It's gigantic, of almost $20 billion, bringing our state budget for fiscal year 24 and 25 to $71.5 billion. There's ongoing spending growth into the next biennium, with the budget set at roughly $65 billion. So just as a kind of reference point, we came into this session with a $52 billion budget. Gives you a sense of kind of the leap up in spending that we've done. And then there is $1.5 billion left on the bottom line for the upcoming fiscal year. But what's interesting is in the next fiscal year, there's a budget deficit. They can obviously use that money on the bottom line to solve their deficit, but it's interesting to see how you've gone from this massive surplus to a deficit within a 4-year time frame. I won't go through this list. This just gives you a sense of where the money was spent. The biggest portion went to the education budget. That was a priority for the governor, the speaker, and the majority leader. Next up after that, an enormous amount of spending went to the state's health and human services programs. That's everything from healthcare to social safety net programs. Higher ed got a big chunk of money. There's a lot of bonding money spent. And for the business folks, we saw some spending that we really did support. One is $100 million in broadband spending. Some of that is federal money, some of that is state money. But the importance there is we really should achieve connectivity across our state sooner rather than later with that big infusion of funds. And there was $1 billion spent on housing, which is also a positive for employers. I think every community in the state is struggling with housing and childcare needs. So on the tax bill side, and this is a 4-year look, the legislature raised $10 billion in taxes and fees. And it's important to note that's not just happening in the tax bill, it's happening in other bills. So the tax bill increase was $2.2 billion. There's $3.7 billion in tax and fee increases just for transportation. There's a $2.8 billion payroll tax that's included in the paid family leave program, and then $729 million for housing. So the taxes are spread across a number of different bills. The net tax decreases are $4.5 billion. And we always like to kind of look at end of session negotiations and see where the 3 different legs of the stool ended up. And the governor had proposed $362 million, the Senate $444 million, and House much bigger at $973 million, but they settled even higher than that at $1.3 billion for fiscal years 24 and 25. So just in the tax bill, and again, taxes are spread across a number of different bills, but this is where the revenue raisers come in. So the corporate tax increases, and these are permanent, come from a global tax that will squarely hit multinational corporations. That 50% tax is higher than every other state that we're aware of. There's a dividends received deduction tax. There's a net operating loss tax change. So all of those 3 things are corporate tax increases, but there are also permanent individual income tax increases. One is on net investment income. Another is a change in how standard itemized deductions are going to work. There were 3 provisions that we really were very concerned about that we saw in the tax bill. One was worldwide combined reporting. And I don't know if you can see it on the slide, but the Wall Street Journal editorialized about what a bad idea this was. There was a 5th tier income tax proposed. And as many of you know, a lot of businesses pay their business tax to their individual returns. So we always keep an eye on that individual tax. And then a capital gains tax of 13.85%. So as I said in the beginning, we were hoping to go in the opposite direction on taxes. And there's some really onerous tax proposals now included in Minnesota's laws. Now, There's also rebates and credits. Here's some listing of what individuals for the most part will get. There's a one-time rebate check. This is the Walls check idea that we heard at the end of last session. It's much smaller than he had proposed. It's $260 for single individuals and dependents. It's income limited. In fact, all of these tax credits and rebates are income dependent. They're not just for everyone. There's a very significant child care tax credit that will cost $893 million. There's a partial but not full Social Security tax exemption. I know a lot of people had been hoping for the full tax exemption. The legislature decided to target that to individuals that have $100,000 or less income. And then there's $970 million of increased spending for local government aid and property tax refund programs. I don't believe there is any business tax relief proposed in these big bills. Now, switching gears, one of the other just massive changes that we saw with the legislation was this kind of heavy hand on employment laws. I won't step through all of these. There's so many, I didn't even include all of them in the slides, but there's a couple of really big ones and some important dates that you should be aware of because they're coming up fast and you'll be required to comply with them. So the first is the earned sick and safe time mandate. If you do business in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, Duluth, I think I mentioned, they all have their own earned sick and safe time requirements. This has no small business exemptions. It requires employers to provide 2 full weeks of fully paid time off for specific instances. If you're sick, if you don't have childcare, if there's a weather-related issue that prevents your childcare from being operational. This begins January 2024. The bigger mandate, the paid family and medical leave, which I have to thank all of you who contacted your legislators and let them know how this would impact you. And thanks to Colleen for lobbying at the Capitol as well. This is a very big mandate. It's 12 weeks of family leave, 12 weeks of medical leave. It's capped at 20 weeks. It's a partial wage replacement that's split between employers and employees. It's a 0.7% payroll tax. It will have 400 new employees running a state agency and basically replace companies' HR function and benefit if they offer it on paid time off. That begins in a few years, January 1st, 2026, sorry. There are a number of small business changes, nursing mothers accommodations. There are very significant regulatory fines and penalties related to OSHA changes. The other really big change on workplace mandates is the legalization of recreational marijuana. That will begin August 1st. Marijuana won't be available for sale quite yet, but you can possess marijuana legally. And there are also restrictions and guidelines for testing employees and job applicants that are included in the bill. A complicated bill. We are running a number of webinars on all of these things, and we'll share that with River Heights members as soon as we get them, because it's a lot. It's a lot of complicated stuff for you to comply with. Okay, changing gears again. This is what happened on transportation. Much of the surplus, many surplus dollars and general fund dollars were used to fund transportation at $1 billion. It's a big, big bill. We were successful in convincing the legislature to dedicate 100% of auto parts sales taxes for transportation purposes, but it's a very slow phase and it won't take place fully until 2033. There's new money for trunk highway bonding. And all of this is being funded in not just from surplus and general fund dollars, but a lot of tax increases, as we talked about in the beginning of the session. And you can see them all listed here. There's a 0.75% metro area sales tax that starts in October. There are tab fee increases that start next January. The gas tax will go up and will be indexed to inflation. I believe it's roughly a 3 to 5 cent increase over time. That starts in January 24. Motor vehicle sales tax increases. And then there's this unique new 50-cent delivery fee. So if you order from food or a big retailer and your bill is over $100, you will pay a 50 cent retail fee on that charge. And that starts next July. And then there's some other items under the transportation bill. There's funding for a passenger train to Duluth. There's state and local match dollars for the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. There are a number of different mandates and restrictions on lane expansion, rail. There are various proposals for transit safety, as well as reforming the Met Council's governance and elections. So this was a big bill with a lot of different provisions as well. Environment saw more work than we've seen in the past. There was a lot of things done, and our argument has always been, can you please try to make it more customer friendly so people understand when they'll get a permit and how long it will take, and a little more transparency in the process when you're deliberating approving a permit. The state was given more money for IT upgrades and coordination for permitting needs. That's the good news. But on the bad news, there are a number of very onerous new restrictions, air and water permits, specifically for state air permits. There's a new consideration for environmental justice areas that include the 7-county metro area, Duluth and Rochester. These are areas that might have long-term lower income or poverty levels. It might have a large minority speaking, non-English speaking populations. There's a number of different factors that are actually defined by a federal government definition. And the commissioner of the Pollution Control Agency can determine what these areas are, or there can be 100 signatures on a petition to determine what impact these areas would have. So that's something we'll be keeping our eye on, and we're pretty concerned about. There are new order management requirements only for the metro area. There's new air toxics reporting requirements only for the metro area. And there are a number of new fees and fines for groundwater appropriation permits. So if you're in ag, if you're a city, if you're a golf course, some very stiff new fines and penalties for if you use more than your groundwater permit allows. And the last big piece on the environment is this new PFAS regulation. This is people call this the forever chemical. It is in, I think, almost every product we use in our lives, amazing numbers of products. And what the state has decided is that they are going to ban 11 of those products by 2025. They are going to require reporting of any product that has PFAS in it that's in Minnesota in 2026, and then a full and complete ban of any product that has PFAS in it by 2032. So it's cookware, it's in seatbelts, it's in carpeting, it's in draperies. It is in, I think, almost everything that we touch in our lives. It's a very commonly used product. Medical devices are exempted, but they must register with the state and pay a fee. We are the second state in the country to enact this ban. Maine had done it before Minnesota, and they are in, having all kinds of complications and delaying starts and delaying different aspects of the bill. So it will be very interesting to see how Minnesota's PFAS law evolves. And I just want to close by sharing a couple of different perspectives, and I think these quotes are so excellent on how, people from different parties view the session. And I'll quickly read them. From Representative Pat Garofalo: this changes Minnesota from a centrist state to hard left. We had politics that skewed sometimes center right, sometimes center left. But this, whether you call it progressive or ambitious or just extreme, is outside of the norm of what I've always thought of Minnesota as sort of a deliberative, temperate and centrist culture. And the governor's take is we've basically transformed itself from the first Minnesota miracle, transformed itself from a cold agrarian state into a nation leader. And his view is this is Minnesota Miracle 2.0 because we're willing to take risks, do things differently, and we're doing that again. And I think that's just a really great way to encapsulate the two different views of what happened in this legislative session. There are many things I didn't include in the slides, including healthcare and elections and energy policy. It was just a giant session for policy changes. And I'd be happy to share those with you at another time, Colleen, if your members are interested.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so if you had just like 2 items of advice for businesses, 1 or 2 items, what would you tell businesses right now? What are your recommendations for businesses?
So the one thing is we will share with all of our local chamber and federation partners a kind of a toolkit for all the compliance deadlines, because we want to make sure nobody is caught by surprise. There were so many different laws passed. We just want to make sure everybody's up to speed. The second thing I would ask you to do, and this is a real plea, is please get to know your legislators, your House members, your Senate members. I don't think they hear from business enough. They hear from a lot of other stakeholders who are very active at the Capitol. But given the session results, I'm not sure they are sufficiently sensitive to the challenges of doing business in our state. So we can help you set up a tour of your facility or a meeting. And they do represent you and your employees as well. So get to know them, hold them accountable for decisions you like and don't like. Thank them for doing a hard job, but make sure they understand how you're operating in their community. I think it's really important.
Oh, thank you. Again, Laura is the Senior Vice President of Advocacy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Laura, so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of information presented here, and we're just really scratching the surface. CCDC is planning a series of webinars to help you understand the effects of these sessions on your businesses by taking a deeper dive into several of these issues. You can watch your local chamber announcements and visit our CCDC website at dakotacountychambers.com. In closing, I'd like to thank our CCDC partners, Apple Valley, Burnsville, Lakeville, Hastings, and the River Heights Chambers of Commerce. Thank you for tuning in today.